Hey homies, here we are with my review of the Duskbloods. I actually finally got around to streaming the network test, or specifically like playing the network test. I streamed my reactions to it. I wasn't able to show gameplay, unfortunately. But I was able to finally find the time to like get on board. I was able to like play a match. I was able to like go through the tutorials and honestly, the game is quite a lot worse than I was expecting. I was thinking, looking at like the beta or looking at like the images that they might have something going on here. They might have more interesting lore. They might have better characters. They might fix all the problems with From Slop games as a whole. I was seeing people have all this talk about like, improved movement options. People were talking about better PvP. People were talking about like, because this was a Nintendo exclusive, it would be automatically better because of that. I can tell you right now that none of that is true. Like, this is the same exact From Slop PvP we've been getting since, like, Demon Souls, okay? There have been no improvements. There have been no changes. There's nothing really to make this game stick out compared to all the other mediocre action RPGs we've gotten out of this stale derivative genre over the past 25 years, okay? I'm sorry, past 20 years. Like, Demon Souls is just not that impressive. It wasn't impressive when it came out. It wasn't impressive when they remade it as Dark Souls. It wasn't impressive when they made a sequel to that, or when they made Bloodborne, when they made Sekiro. Like, From Slop have always been the hacks of the gaming industry that basically exist by convincing tryhards that they're way better at these kind of games than they actually are. That, like, these games are way harder and, like, better than they actually are. The simple fact of the matter is, like, Souls is a fad, the video game equivalent of the MCU, and the masses just don't want to admit it, right? So we've been going through this song and dance where people are in denial about this. People tried to hype up Elden Ring as, like, game of the decade, and they made excuses for Armored Core 6. They made excuses for Elden Ring DLC. They made excuses for, everything else the company has done since then, right? Like, it has been a complete and total train wreck over the past couple of years. And there's just been this, like, very strong unwillingness to acknowledge it. And with Duskbloods, I think we can safely say there is a big problem at From Slop. Because this company is beloved specifically for making high-quality single-player RPGs. Nobody cares about the multiplayer. In fact, I think most people would be better off without it. The multiplayer doesn't really add a whole lot to the experience, like, other than serving as, like, kind of a stealth tutorial, right? The multiplayer aspects of From Slop have always been this thing that just kind of doesn't really add anything to the core experience, okay? Like, it's kind of there. It's kind of there for you to mess around with, but, like, most players aren't going to use it because, like, it's unintuitive and it makes no sense. The Duskbloods is an entire game centered around PvP, okay? Like, when you actually play the beta, when you actually play the network test, when you actually, like, experience this game, at your core, all you're getting is this PvP experience where you're going around fighting enemies in the environment, leveling up your character so you can, like, compete against, like, other players. That's it. That's really all there is to it. Like, it is Night Rain. It is like Fortnite. Like, this is a game that had no real thought put into it whatsoever. Like, Miyazaki looked at the success of Fortnite and it was just like, this is what we have to do. So he just completely decided to retool Souls-like games to be PvP roguelikes with, like, no regard for what fans actually wanted and for what, like, people actually wanted to play, right? This is a game that is radically trying to be something it's not. It's trying to be this, like, open, like, battle royale style, like, Souls-like game where you level up your character and acquire new abilities and fight all these enemies. And yet, like, it's not entertaining, it's not fun to play, it's boring, it's generic. A lot of people are saying it plays just like Bloodborne. I never played Bloodborne, so I can't attest to that. But like, I believe it, honestly. Like, again, FromSlop has a problem with innovation. They have a problem with making something that feels fresh, new, and exciting. Because I think, in theory, the idea of having like a game like this where you're playing as a bunch of different characters running around a map and like fighting enemies, that sounds like that could work, honestly. Like, that feels like something that they could have done. But like, the way it works in practice is that it really does feel primarily like they're trying to ape off the Fortnite thing. It really feels like they're trying to do the same kind of thing. They're trying to have like the make the battle royale thing happen for them, and it just isn't going to happen. People are buying FromSlop games for very specific reasons, and we're getting to the point now where FromSlop just isn't willing to deliver on the FromSlop formula. Because it's old, tired, derivative. They know this, but the way they've been trying to address it, the way they've been trying to like break into PvP, the way they've tried like introducing new franchises, the way that they tried to introduce a spin-off title, Night Rain, into the Elden Ring universe and like have it like coast off the popularity of that game. It just goes to show you just how desperate they are to move outside of their niche, because they're very worried about what's going to happen after the fad ends and after people start seeing through these games and start getting bored of them and start like addressing all these very real concerns they have. Like, they're desperately trying to move on to the next big thing, and yet their developers don't have the talent for it. They're not capable of doing anything outside of the Souls formula, which at its core is basically just a worse Castlevania game, right? Like, Souls has always been an extremely limited IP, but that's what people liked about it. That's what people liked about the brand and about FromSlop, is that they felt like the underdogs of the industry going up against the big boys and like doing all this like crazy stuff to stick out. Like, back when Souls first came out, there was really nothing else like it, and that's what people loved about it. But we're at the point now where these games are old. They're tired. They're derivative. The Age of Fire is ending. And what we're seeing is that, like, they're not new anymore. Okay, this isn't the fresh new kid. Like, they are the establishment, essentially. They are entrenched, big-name RPG developers, and yet they haven't, like, really shown any noticeable change or growth over the past 20 years. In fact, I would say they've regressed, honestly. Like, because I went on record saying that I believe the original Dark Souls to be better than Elden Ring, because the setting work makes more sense. The level design is better. The bosses are more interesting, right? You have more interesting lore. You have, like, a better concept. It was, like, a fresher concept at the time to begin with, right? Elden Ring, at its core, was just a rehash of Dark Souls. And the Duskbloods, conversely, is a rehash of Elden Ring, Night Rain, and Bloodborne. So much so that, like, Miyazaki has been kind of concerned about calling it the Duskbloods because of the association with Bloodborne. But, like, this is my mindset towards these games, is that the developers are trying new ideas, they're experimenting, they're trying to do radically new things like this, and yet every single time it fails. Every single time people look at it and they're just like, oh yeah, that's Bloodborne, you know? Like, the amount of times I've heard people say that about this game, like, that's Bloodborne, with, like, no real regard to the fact that this is technically a new IP that FromSlop owns outright, right? Like, Duskbloods should have had its own identity. It should have had its own brand. It should have been, like, able to do all these new interesting things. But the simple fact of the matter is that it has completely failed at that, because FromSlop cannot escape their own shadow. And that has become the big problem with the brand, is that we are reaching the point where players are playing this game and realizing that they had a much better time playing older FromSlop games. Games like Demon Souls or Dark Souls or, like, you know, Bloodborne. Like, we're at the point now where the company has fallen off. And we're in that process where people are slowly beginning to accept that fact. Like, I don't know how many releases it's going to take until people start realizing there's something wrong with the company. Because I think a lot of people have this idea that, like, All they would have to do is just put out like a new Elden Ring, like Elden Ring 2, Electric Boogaloo, and everything's going to be fine. But it's really not that simple. Like, you are going to start seeing diminishing returns with all Elden Ring products. You are going to see diminishing returns with all of this stuff. And the simple fact of the matter is that, like, this content was never that good to begin with. It was only glazed because there was nothing else like it. Because, like, people thought they could weaponize it against Nintendo or the Legend of Zelda or Metroid franchises. Like, they thought that, right? But one of the things I've noticed, and I think this is the big thing that's going to kill them long term, is that there are several developers now that are doing the FromSlop thing better than FromSlop ever did. Okay? You know, you have Stellar Blade doing the shift, doing like the Souls-like thing. You have Lies of P. You have like Another Crab's Treasure. You have like all these like indie games that are doing the exact same thing better, but with like fresh and unique themes. All the while, like FromSlop just rehashes their same old tired like FromSlop template, right? That's how I felt playing this game. Is that like there are a lot more interesting FromSlop clones I've seen over the past couple of years than this game, and I feel as if fanboys don't want to accept it, but because FromSlop are such hacks and they haven't improved their development capabilities at all, they're going to be easily outstripped by developers like this. In fact, I've played several Souls-like games that are better than any Souls game at this stage, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. It's a fresh, new, exciting genre. What we are going to see over the next 10, 20, 30 years is that, like, this is going to become a thing where we're going to see, like, you know, more and more of these games come out, stops FromSlop. There's going to be so many of them, you can't keep track of them because they're so easy to make, right? Because they don't take any real skill. You're going to see all these games come out, flood the market, and eventually people are going to lose interest in them, right? And I think this is the first major release where that's becoming apparent. Like, people are getting tired of the Souls formula. And this is the beginning of the end of that fad.